Hey friends, I'm Pastor Lia Scholl from Wake Forest Baptist Church. I'm really grateful that you're taking time to tune in here today. We're in the midst of a sermon series called Unraveled, Seeking God When Our Plans Fall Apart. And today's reflection is about Moses and Pharaoh and softening our hearts when our lives have become unraveled. Everything may not fit too well together today because this sermon took me places that I wasn't quite ready to go. So be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Today's text is about Moses throwing down the gauntlet to Pharaoh, insisting that he release the Hebrew people from their captivity. This is Moses at his best, striving for liberation and for justice for his people. You know there are 10 plagues, each more terrible than the last, and that it takes the threat and implementation of each of these to soften Pharaoh's heart to let God's people go. But you remember how he got here, right? We know that Moses was minding his flock when he met God in a burning bush. That out from that burning bush, God said, I have observed the misery of my people who are in Egypt. I have heard their cry on account of their taskmasters. Indeed, I know their suffering. And I have come down to deliver them from the Egyptians and to bring them up out of the land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the land of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites. The cry of the Israelites has now come to me. I have also seen how the Egyptians oppress them. So come, I will send you, Moses, to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. It was a moment that changed everything. Oh yeah, Moses tried to argue. He tried to pawn off the work on someone else, his brother. He tried to explain that he wasn't good enough for the work. But still, that moment changed the trajectory of his life and the life of all of the Hebrew people. That was when Moses' heart softened. Have you had a moment like that? I have. 20 years ago, on a Tuesday morning in September, I was getting ready to go to my brand new first church job. I was a church secretary at my home church in Birmingham, Alabama. It was like my 5th day on the job. The senior minister was out in the woods that day with his son and unreachable by phone. The first plane hit sometime when I was getting ready for work, and the second plane hit moments after I arrived at church. By mid-morning, the associate pastor and I were planning a community worship service for that evening. We were working with 6 rabbis, 7 pastors, an imam, and various city dignitaries, making sure that they were all able to speak to the community, making sure to include everyone so that all who came would feel comforted and supported. It was the first service I ever planned. More than 1,500 people showed up that evening, including 2 Muslim women in hijab who were too afraid to come in the doors. That one day changed the trajectory of my ministry. Rather than hardening my heart, solidifying my pain into nationalism and vengeance, that day softened my heart. From then on, I saw the importance of interfaith work, of justice work, of trauma work, of resilience work, and of being a pastoral presence that says, we can get through this. So many of our systems hardened that day, especially policing. I realized this week how the FBI was a federal police force prior to 9/11 that didn't do spy work, and the CIA was barred from doing domestic work. But now they switched both of those roles off. There were changes in the Department of Defense and the creation of Homeland Security, and so much money funneled to military contracts. Come on, we've been perpetually at war since 9/11. The Washington Post magazine this week detailed that there were changes in TV and art and sports and education and bigotry and Islam and immigration, travel, even architecture and fashion that all came from that one day. I wonder, did your heart harden or soften on that day? And if I tell you the truth, I can't help but wonder how this 18 months of pandemic will change our hearts too. An article in the Greater Good magazine gave a good at-a-glance synopsis of the changes the pandemic has made thus far to our world. There's more political conflict, more racism and prejudice, more mistrust, more social inequality. There's an erosion of democratic institutions, low well-being, a rise in authoritarianism, more economic hardship, a feeling of estrangement, little trust in science, loneliness, educational inequity and inequality, career disruptions, pessimism, stunted child development, self-centeredness, and despair. Like 9/11 and that moment at the burning bush, this ish is going to change us. And the question is, will it harden or soften our hearts? Because for all the bad that 9/11 brought, it also made some of us more compassionate. It led many of us into helping professions. It created deep bonds in communities and made us overcome our deepest prejudices. So what are the ways the pandemic is changing the trajectory of your life? As for me personally, the pandemic has changed my priorities. I need more time for introspection, more time to unravel the stressors in my life, and I've come to realize that productivity has taken the place in my life of contemplation and connection. Mostly, I find I need a community, a pod, as it were, that cares for me in the same way that I care for others. That there is a presence in my life. I need that presence in my life, a community of carers, and, well, frankly, some folks who can be a part of my apocalyptic pod. I wanted that pre-pandemic, and the pandemic has revealed to me just how much I need it now, and my family needs it now. It has been my hope that that's what church is and can be. So this week, I'd like to ask you to think about what has changed for you, or maybe what you want to change through this pandemic. Will it make you more compassionate, more empathetic, or like Moses, more driven for liberation? And if not, what would it take for you to become those things? What ways are you willing to create change in your own life to center your family more, to make more time for introspection, to move your life from productivity to contemplation and connection? Ultimately, will you allow the pandemic to harden or soften your heart? I pray this morning that it will soften it. And before I close, though, I want to acknowledge that for some of you, this is too hard a question for right now. This pandemic has neither hardened nor softened you yet. Instead, this pandemic has broken you, or at least tipped you over the edge into uncharted territory and into considering its outcomes. And really for you, considering its outcomes are just a bridge too far right now. 9/11 did that too. I want you to know that you are not alone. We are here with you. Please know that you do not have to go it alone. Call me, text me, email me, get in touch so that I can know that you're in need and in need of someone to walk alongside you. My heart is willing to meet you where you're at because I love you and I love being your pastor.